much for joining today. Um, this is going to be the first in a series of virtual sessions titled Virtual Connection, a podcast about teleworking, the perks, the nuances, and everything in between, sprinkled with some stories. I'll start the series as a number of videos, and then I'm going to upload them onto Spotify as MP3 files in a podcast format. So you can always go back and re-listen to a session or an episode if you're curious to know more. For this first video and first session, I thought we would delve a little bit deeply into the context about telework and virtual work and just what virtual connection is born off of. I am a full-time remote employee, which means that I work 40 hours a week, entirely remotely, oftentimes from here, my office space in my house in Seattle, Washington. In 2018, I started speaking with my current company about transitioning to become a fully remote staff. At that point, it was understood across the company that, the quality of your work was really what mattered, not necessarily where you were working from. And so they were very amiable in allowing me to work often once or twice a month if I needed to work from my house when I was going to grad school. And then my husband, David, actually had an opportunity to finish his MBA as a part of a fellowship in Copenhagen, Denmark. And so at that point, David and I were just ready to kind of move. We were ready for the next big thing in our lives. And so, we had been married for a few months at that point, and it seemed like our lives kind of converged at an opportunity for us to be able to move and transition our lives into a new country, to see a new way of life and immerse ourselves into an entirely new pace of how to do things. So I floated this idea with my supervisor and then, with everyone throughout the team, kind of gauging what would be the best opportunity, what would make the most sense. Because at that time, I was really learning quite a bit from my company, from the skills and best practices of those who I had been working alongside. And so they really served as my propeller to be able to feel comfortable in approaching this idea. So then just in the beginning of 2019, actually in January, I became a fully remote employee. David and I moved to Copenhagen into a very, very small little apartment, 2-room apartment in the heart of Copenhagen. He would go to classes during the day and then come back and work from home in the evenings. And I would be working still East Coast hours in Copenhagen. So it was quite the transition, quite an experience, to say the least. And that's a little bit of the context about how I became a fully remote employee. I would also love to kind of delve a little bit more deeply for this session into the things that I love, the things I don't love so much, and then I'll leave you all with a funny story before we close the day. So for the most part, I do get to set my own schedule. Many of my meetings are actually set up according to clients or my colleagues, and I try to stay quite flexible in scheduling these meetings. So I do love that. I love that I get to reach out and communicate and collaborate with people across so many different time zones. When I was working in Copenhagen, I worked very closely with people who were in Geneva, in Uganda, even in Thailand. It was such a thrilling and exciting chance to really connect and reach out and just kind of meet people where they were. I love that I am able to work from anywhere, which means that I have taken calls from inside of an RV in volcanic islands in the North Atlantic Ocean, all the way to, from my dad's office in Aurora, Colorado. It's been a really rewarding experience to be able to be in that position where I am able to adjust and set my schedule as needed. Another thing I love is that I have an opportunity in this role to really tap into people's creative sides and also explore my creative side as well. Of course, nothing is going to replace face-to-face contact in any sense of the word, but I think it is helpful um, to be able to be forced into this role almost of teleworking, because then you start thinking of creative ways that you can still maintain that connection and still connect with people. I think more than anything, if all of these quarantines that have been happening lately as a result of the coronavirus, really forcing people into their homes and to refrain from stepping outside and interacting physically with people, um, I think this has been a really wonderful opportunity for us to explore how we can best go about being creative in those regards. Some things that I don't love so much about virtual delivery and virtual connection is that um, yes, while I am able to generally set my own schedule, I think for me, one of the biggest challenges was learning when and how to draw my boundaries in a virtual environment. So we'll go back to when I was working in Denmark. I first moved there and I wanted to maintain my connection and my meetings with all of the people who I had already had meetings scheduled, recurring meetings scheduled for. Um, and in doing so, I essentially was working in East Coast time while living in Central European time. So I would be on meetings quite late at night until 10 or 11 p.m. And then I would stay, because if you're in your working mind, it takes you a little while to slow down a little bit. And so I wouldn't be getting to sleep until midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Um, and then that would in turn allow me to sleep in late throughout the day. And if you don't know, in Copenhagen, they're quite far north, and so that resulted in me sleeping throughout the few hours of sunshine that actually were in that country at that time. So slowly I tried to kind of ease into this process of changing the times for virtual meetings to make sure that they suited my schedule and sticking to my schedule. So that's one thing that we always think, or that I thought at least when I went fully virtual, that it wouldn't have been a problem if I had just kind of continued the way that I was operating. But at the end of the day, I got quite depressed because the only people I was interacting with were people who were very far away from me and who are in a different time zone. And so as I was really gearing down my day, they were just in the heart of working. And so I felt that I needed to mimic that. And so once I started drawing my own boundaries and once I started really kind of feeling my oats and blocking my calendar, in Denmark, it was the mornings were for work time and the afternoons were for meeting time. And then after that, I made a very strict schedule to stop working at a certain time. Then I started sleeping better. I started waking up earlier in the day so that I could actually enjoy the sunshine. Um, and that was one of my biggest lessons learned, I think, from that experience. Now, as you might have heard, I actually live in Seattle, Washington, so on the complete opposite side of the world. So I have had to go through that same exercise of transitioning and experimenting with different schedules and times. I still do work with clients in the Central European time zone, and then less so now with clients all the way in Southeast Asia, but I still have some clients that do work in the missions across the world. So I have had to be on a number of very early morning calls, 4 or 5 a.m. And I think that practice of learning when really to establish your schedule and really finding what works best for you uh, has been my go-to opportunity to establish a work and life balance. Um, I do welcome any questions or thoughts that you may have. You can feel free to send them to my email directly at citizenoftheworld89@gmail.com. Um, this series of sessions on virtual connection, I really want to kind of delve a bit more deeply into best practices, tools for telework, how to maximize your day, different organizational tools that you could use for yourself and for your company. Um, but for the time being, I will just leave you with a funny story of telework that happened to me when I first moved out here to Seattle. Um, so when we did first move here, we moved into kind of this hippie bungalow in a cottage in the forest sort of thing. I'm not sure how long it had been since anyone had lived here. And the house was covered in spiders, let's be honest. There were some spiders everywhere. And we did our best to clean up all of the spider webs in the corners. And I used peppermint oil because I heard that that's actually a natural deterrent for spiders. And it did work quite well. And it helped my house to smell fresh and minty. Um, but that's not to say that every now and again we do get an occasional spider in the house. One morning I was on a pretty important session, a virtual session, where I was leading a kind of a debrief session with a number of clients in kind of throughout the world. And I was in the middle of my production, which is what I call when I kind of give instructions on how people can best use their um, virtual platform. And I was sitting there talking, giving the instruction when literally out of the blue, a spider dropped, a carpenter spider, which is similar to a daddy long legs, dropped down from the ceiling very slowly and just appeared right between my eyes, staring at me in the face. And so I had to maintain my composure, but because it was so early in the morning and because I was so startled, I yelped. And I can't remember if I said a bad word or not. I don't think I did, but I threw my headset off of my head. And I took a really deep breath and I had to compose myself before picking my headset back up again and putting it on, deciphering through the concern of my colleagues on the line and reassuring them that everything was okay. A spider just dropped in to say hello. So thanks all so much. I'm really excited to start connecting with you virtually and to share some more tips and tricks of telework with you. So stay tuned and um, we'll see you again. Stay well, stay healthy, and stay connected.